but it looks like this. It's as if you're sitting on the floor with your left knee bent and your foot coming out toward the right. If you can't quite visualize this, you might have to take a look at me doing it. And your right knee bent with your foot also coming out toward the right. Then, to help support you, your left hand comes down toward the floor, so it kind of helps you get a little bit more on top of those sit bones. Some people find that getting a little cushion under the sit bones can help them get there, but this may not be a movement which works so well for you. A lot of its focus is to really take that movement that happens at the hip and start to take it back through the core, and very importantly, up into the head. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the head neck piece of this. And because of that, you can do this movement in a chair. So you can also sit in a chair if your pelvis doesn't have, isn't very good at sitting on the floor like this. So the upper body parts of this that you can do sitting in a chair is now to bring your right arm up, so that as if you were going to point straight out parallel to the floor, and then bend at the elbow and bring that hand across to your left shoulder. So it's just touching the shoulder. You just want to kind of, once again, make the movement work as a unit. And then as a unit, you let your elbow head turn toward the right and just take it to wherever its comfort is in end range, but you really don't kind of push beyond where the arm is going. Like, you stay about looking at your elbow as you go across, and then come back to center, and you can go past center and turn a little bit to the left, and try not to go too much past where your elbow's going with your head at this point. So your nose and elbow are going somewhat similarly together, and then coming back. So that's the first level of the movement. Then you can really start taking this into neck and actually eye tracking movements. So for example, you can start to rotate to the right and let your head go a little bit further, and then let it stay there as your elbow and shoulder come back toward the left. And just feel what it's like to kind of feel the difference in movement as you hold your head where it was and let the torso come back towards center, and then slowly let it come back toward the right, meet with where the head is, and then the head can come back with it as it comes back toward the left. You can also do movements where you take your head in the opposite direction. So as your elbow comes across to the right, you could explore letting your head turn toward the left. And these are ways of really letting your neck and torso start to differentiate themselves. And then you can totally reverse that. So your head slowly turning across to the right as your elbow turns across to the left. Now, one of the things you'll notice with this movement is that if you were just to take your eyes and track along something like a countertop or an edge of where a ceiling meets a wall, that if you just tracked with your eyes as you were turning across like this, you might notice that your eyes every once in a while jump. Or even if you just stood steady, like without turning your head, and just let your eyes track across the room, you might notice also that your eyes every once in a while jump across or along that line. Those are the places where there's a disconnect between neck movement muscles and eye tracking. And it's a very important piece of how we keep ourselves balanced in our upper body. So this movement is a really good way of catching some of that by getting the eyes and the neck and the torso to move in different ways and get more sophisticated. So for example, aside from that just tracking along a line, which is therapeutic in itself, you can also do this. You could take your elbow off to the right, your head toward the left, and then as you come back towards center, you could keep your eyes looking out toward the left as your head came across to the right. And then you could start reversing that. So as your head came back across to the left, you could let your eyes turn across to the right. Now initially this may feel a lot like as if your eyes are following your elbow essentially. Feel a lot like patting your head and rubbing your tummy, But if you just keep on looking for the smoothness, similar as we were doing with the steeple and with the dish rag, you'll find that gradually you start dropping out of your effortfulness and you can just start to feel the connection. Now, of course, you do this movement on the opposite side as well. If you're capable of doing it sitting on the floor, then you would do that by just changing position. If you're sitting in a chair, well, it's much simpler. You just bring in up your left arm and start following the same movements of head, first of all, just following your elbow, your nose following your elbow, and then starting to break it up, letting your head go in opposite directions from your elbow. And then if you feel really adventuresome, starting to notice what happens if you separate your eyes and your head movement, so your eyes are following your elbow as your head turns in the opposite direction. But these are very subtle connections. You don't get the same kind of effort as you did with, say, like muscles of the waist, but very importantly, you can still get into, you'll still notice where you're using unnecessary effort at very deep, sophisticated, well, not so sophisticated levels. So to go very slow with this, maybe just trying the tracking with your eyes along a line in your household, you'll find that gradually your neck starts to relax and become much more like a bobblehead, like something floating on the surface of the ocean, as it follows this tracking and lets down from this grip that it might have been in previously to that.